What is up? GoodMicWork back at ya. Surprise, surprise. A little bit of a format change this week. As most of you know, I'm normally up here on late Wednesday nights, early Thursday mornings to do a joint review of Raw and SmackDown, but this week I figured I would change it up. I had the day off today. I was home to live tweet during Monday Night Raw, and I'm available to do a commentary tonight, and there's a few other things going on that I feel like need to be discussed right away that you guys all want my opinions about, especially the big news that broke today involving Bray Wyatt, as well as some interesting news on Roman Reigns and John Cena, and the NBA Finals wrapped up tonight as well. So I figured since there's so much to talk about, I'll come up and do a short Raw review and talk about all of that stuff. And then later on this week, maybe near the end of the week or early weekend, Friday, maybe even Saturday, I'll come up here and give a quick review of SmackDown and predict this Sunday's Money in the Bank pay-per-view coming to us on the WWE Network. So you're going to get 2 videos out of me this week. Before we get into Raw here, I just want to let you guys know that I was a guest earlier on today on the Joe Cronin Show. I joined up with Joe and Gene from the BSP Wrestling Show, and we discussed Raw and just kind of shot the shit about Samoa Joe and Brock Lesnar and some news on the Hardy Boys, and of course we discussed the Bray Wyatt and JoJo situation as well. So if you want to check that video out, the link is up there in the top right-hand corner. Go visit Joe Cronin's channel, show that video some love, give it a view, give it a like, and let me know what you guys think. I'm definitely open to doing more guest cameos on other people's channels in the future, so hopefully you'll see more of that out of me. And as far as my channel goes, you guys know the drill. Please like this video, trying to get my likes back up and my views back up for that matter. Please subscribe if you have not yet already. If you don't want to watch this video and you'd rather listen to this in podcast form, you can do that. Go to my website, GoodMicWorkCommentaries.com. You can download the MP3 over there. Or if you want to find me on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, I'm available there as well. Let's dive into this really shitty Monday Night Raw. Do you know how disappointed I am in tonight's Raw? I was so looking forward to the big confrontation with Brock Lesnar and Samoa Joe, and that whole thing started out great, but the show really tanked after that. And of course, they were going head-to-head with the NBA Finals that did wrap up tonight. The Golden State Warriors are your NBA champions. I'll have some comments on that later on near the end of the video, so stay tuned if you care what I think about the NBA Finals. So maybe WWE kind of scaled things back. Maybe they didn't go out of their way to give everybody a great show because they knew ratings-wise they were going to be in an uphill battle with the NBA Finals. I don't know, but I was super disappointed in this week's show. But we got to start off with Samoa Joe and Brock Lesnar. That actually did open the show, which was a good move by the WWE because I don't think the basketball game had started yet. So that's when the most eyeballs are going to be on Raw. So having Brock and Joe open the show I thought was perfect. Of course, Brock comes out with Paul Heyman right behind him. Paul Heyman is pretty pissed off about last week, and he gets on the mic and cuts a pretty scathing promo on Samoa Joe and basically ends it by saying that Samoa Joe is not man enough to do to Brock Lesnar what he did to Heyman last week on Raw. And after enough chatter from Paul Heyman, Samoa Joe finally comes out there, the big confrontation we've all been waiting for. He storms down there with a purpose, absolutely fearless, gets right in the ring and stares right in Brock Lesnar's face. It was awesome. And I like that they kind of rehashed Kurt Angle's debut in TNA. Wasn't it Kurt Angle's debut in TNA when he came out and Samoa Joe was in the ring and they had the stare down and Kurt Angle headbutted him? Well, that's the way the brawl between Brock and Joe started tonight. Samoa Joe hit Brock with a headbutt, sent Brock flying back to the middle rope, kind of dropped him to his knees, and they started fighting, and then Brock, of course, got Joe into the corner, started laying in the shoulders into Joe a couple of times, and they kind of rolled around on the ground. Samoa Joe even took him down at one point, and then the entire locker room ran out there to break it up because Kurt Angle had already sent out a bunch of security guards. They couldn't get the job done. Joe and Brock cleaned house with those guys. So the locker room empties and there's the big pull apart, and it was pretty good. I can live with what they did there. I thought that was great, and I also like the fact that Samoa Joe was fearless and did not back down and knocked Brock on his ass a couple of times. As a matter of fact, during the pull apart, I think even Samoa Joe hit him with like a super kick right to the face when, the entire roster is holding Brock in place. So it was a pretty good brawl there. I liked what they did. It wasn't over the top. Nobody went through a table. Nobody had to bleed. It was just a good fight between two big, scary monsters, and that's exactly the way they need to build this match. So neither guy got the better of the other, and I don't know what Brock's schedule is leading into Great Balls of Fire, how many more Raws he is going to be on. I hope that he's on all of them, but most likely he won't be, so hopefully these two guys will have another confrontation, possibly a contract signing. And on the nights that Brock Lesnar is not there, I would imagine Samoa Joe will probably have some matches on Raw and win them leading up to Great Balls of Fire. So I wouldn't say that this segment was as great as the segment last week with Heyman, but it was pretty damn close. And it's still making me really interested in this match between Samoa Joe and Brock Lesnar at Great Balls of Fire. Now, there's been all this talk that it's just going to be a one-off, one-time deal, one match only, and a lot of people are saying that that's what's going to happen because that's what the internet is reporting, and I've heard the same thing, but I don't think we can completely trust that until you have the match, because it's not like the WWE is above changing their plans, you know what I mean? If that match is a barn burner, if we have a fucking 10-star slobber knocker between these two guys at Great Balls of Fire, there ain't no way WWE is going to end it there. They're going to want to continue that. And Joe and Gene and I discussed this today when I was on Cronin's show, and we talked about how Samoa Joe could potentially be a summertime opponent. And we'll talk about Roman Reigns here in a minute, but of course he's got a big announcement next week on Raw where he's going to announce his plans for SummerSlam. Braun Strowman is still injured at this point, so you know, if these guys have a really good match, and depending on what the finish is at Great Balls of Fire, you could have some sort of a rematch at SummerSlam between the two. There's so many things to take into consideration here. You can't just automatically say, oh yeah, the internet says it's going to be a one-off, so I believe it. Not necessarily. There's too many variables here. You have to wonder what WWE's plans are for Braun Strowman. You have to wonder what WWE's plans are for Roman Reigns. Don't forget about Finn Balor and Seth Rollins, who were kind of in the mix for a little while here. And plus, what are they going to do with the title with Brock Lesnar if they really are looking that far ahead to WrestleMania next year and they want to have Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns for the title? You mean to tell me Brock Lesnar is going to hold on to the belt this entire time for the entire year, defending it every 3 months? How in the hell is that going to work? So maybe Brock Lesnar actually drops the belt and regains it before you get to WrestleMania 34 and winds up still dropping it to Roman Reigns. But if he holds it all this time, that's going to be tough for the fans to tolerate. It's sure as hell going to be tough for me to tolerate. So in the meantime, if they want to build another main eventer, this might actually be your chance. I didn't anticipate, and kind of still don't, Samoa Joe winning the Universal title. It's going to be really hard for me to believe that Samoa Joe is going to be able to go in there and beat Brock Lesnar clean and choke him out and win the belt at Great Balls of Fire after they had this long build with Brock and Goldberg that spanned all of those months, and Brock wins the title at WrestleMania. Of all pay-per-views to drop it, he's going to drop it at a random July pay-per-view with the stupidest name in the history of pay-per-views. That's crazy, but if Great Balls of Fire is going to be taking place every year, maybe they want the first one to be memorable, and that would be pretty goddamn memorable if Brock gets knocked off at that pay-per-view and we have a brand new star launched right into the mainstream spotlight and on top of the roster now in Samoa Joe. You beat Brock Lesnar. That's a pretty big deal. And that's something else that we discussed today on Cronin's video, is that Brock Lesnar has never been defeated since he's been back to the WWE, has not lost to a newer guy or a younger guy. I mean, Samoa Joe is not necessarily young. He's a veteran. But when you look at all the people Brock has lost to, he's lost to Goldberg, he's lost to Cena, he's lost to Triple H, but nobody new, nobody that can benefit from defeating him. So Samoa Joe might be that guy. And so even though I'm still right now picking Brock Lesnar to somehow walk out of Great Balls of Fire with the title, I'm not completely convinced that he will. And I think they can get a rematch out of this. You know, number one, if Joe winds up winning, of course we're going to get a rematch because that's the first thing they're going to do. Brock's going to want a rematch, and he'll obviously get it with the whole rematch clause shit that they do. But even if Brock wins, you know, I had mentioned in my last video, what if it's just a really good, hard-fought match? What if they do Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit from the Royal Rumble in 2003, where Benoit came out on the losing end, but the fans applauded him and they respected him after. He got a standing ovation and he was champion just a year later. So maybe if Samoa Joe puts up a really good fight and falls just short to where Brock Lesnar gets out of the ring and is lucky to be champion, they can still set up a rematch there. They could even do shoddy finish. Maybe the referee gets knocked out and Joe has got Brock, you know, locked in the coquina clutch, but there's nobody there to ring the bell, you know, and then after that, after the referee comes to, Brock Lesnar winds up winning, and then Samoa Joe's pissed off, and then maybe somebody like Kurt Angle, which I also mentioned last week, Kurt Angle could step in and say, you know what, I am going to be the special guest referee for this match at SummerSlam because no official can handle these two behemoths, so I guess I've got to do it. And Kurt's got history with both, and then that really opens the door. Then Kurt could be involved in the finish somehow. Kurt could turn heel if they want. They could do so many things if they extended the feud between Brock and Joe beyond Great Balls of Fire. And there's so many things to take into consideration, especially with all of those other opponents. Like I mentioned, Roman Reigns, Braun Strowman, Finn Balor, Seth Rollins, guys like that. I also mentioned last week that maybe Braun Strowman interferes in this match. I don't know what sense that would make because Braun Strowman was kayfabe knocked out of action by Roman Reigns. You would think he would come back and want to get his hands on Roman Reigns. The match between Joe and Brock shouldn't even be on his mind, but I suppose if you want to just get out of that match without harming either guy and leave the door open for a rematch in the future, they could have a non-finish. It could be a DQ. It could be a countout. You could have Strowman interfere and fuck the whole thing up. So there's lots that they can do, but right now, I'm pretty excited about that Brock Lesnar and Samoa Joe match, and they did a great job on Raw building this thing even further, and I'm curious to see what they do next week. As far as the rest of Raw, however, it was kind of shit, to be honest with you. I mean, we didn't even see Roman Reigns or Finn Balor on the show at all. Both of those guys just had video packages. And the one big news item regarding Roman Reigns is that next week, apparently he's coming to Raw to announce what he wants to do at SummerSlam, like it's his choice, and he gets to book his own matches, I guess is what they're saying. So he's going to have something to say on Raw next week, and when you couple that with the news that also broke today about John Cena returning to SmackDown on July 4th, but the creative team pitching an idea that John Cena can be some sort of a free agent, and he might find his way over to Raw somehow. I think that would be a huge mistake to move John Cena to Raw because they're just moving everybody to Raw. What the hell's going on with SmackDown if every major star has to be on Raw? So maybe they're going to make up some bullshit to where John Cena can actually appear on both shows. Now, if they do that, I guess it's okay. Which means if he is allowed to appear on both shows, and Roman Reigns has a big announcement next week on Raw, what do you think about Roman Reigns versus John Cena at SummerSlam? I would be perfectly fine with that. I really enjoyed the work between Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman, but I don't know if I want to see the blow-off between those two guys at SummerSlam. I think they can do that somewhere else. And if you're looking for big marquee matchups for SummerSlam, matches that look good in lights, Roman Reigns versus John Cena is pretty damn epic. It reminds me of 7-8 years ago, they did John Cena and Batista at SummerSlam. I think Batista won the first one, and then later on they had the rematch at WrestleMania, and John Cena won that. I think he even won the title at that WrestleMania. So, maybe they're setting up this big match between the two biggest stars in the company, or the two biggest stars that WWE thinks they have, and put that match at SummerSlam. I'd be perfectly fine with that because it keeps both guys away from the world title. And, next year, saving that for WrestleMania or something, they might have other plans for both of these guys. So this might be a match that they need to have now. And if that's the case, I'm all for it, but it's going to be interesting how they try to explain this on screen, how they try to justify the fact that, John Cena's back, he's not going to be on SmackDown anymore, he's going to be on Raw. At least have Roman go to SmackDown a little bit. If they're truly going to do John Cena versus Roman Reigns, then maybe you have John Cena come on Raw a couple of weeks and Roman Reigns go to SmackDown a couple of weeks, and you have a big inter-promotional match. From Roman Reigns' perspective, I can actually see the logic in him challenging John Cena. I mean, he's had a hell of a year. He retired The Undertaker. He's rumored to face Brock Lesnar next year. So putting a John Cena match in between that and have Roman Reigns just run through everybody, and in 1 year's time he could retire The Undertaker, be one of the very few guys ever to beat John Cena clean. And of course, we all know John Cena loses all the time at SummerSlam. He also knocks off Braun Strowman along the way, and then next year at WrestleMania, he slays the Beast and wins the Universal title by beating Brock Lesnar and getting that monkey off his back because those guys main evented Mania a couple of years ago, and it could be one hell of a year for Roman Reigns. The fans are going to throw up. It's going to be awful to watch, but that might be what the WWE is leading towards here. And it'll be interesting, too. Roman Reigns versus John Cena, I think, is an interesting match just to see what the crowd does, where their alliance is. I mean, it's going to be, they're not going to know which way is up. Well, which guy do we hate worse? This is going to be tough. So you're going to have half the crowd chanting for Roman, half the crowd chanting for Cena. And, I think John Cena is starting to turn that corner. We always see that. I said that 7 years ago when I first started doing commentaries, and the entire world hated John Cena. I said, mark my words, there will come a time where you will start to respect him. You might not love the guy, but you'll start to come around on him and all those ridiculous claims, he can't wrestle and he's so boring and he's the worst fucking thing ever. You will realize how silly that sounds when a few years go by and you grow up and mature a little bit and really see John Cena for what he is. He already got that last year. Remember at SummerSlam when he lost to AJ? The fans cheered for him after the match. They're starting to turn the corner a little bit on John Cena. And that will also happen to Roman Reigns in the distant future, 7 years from now. People will probably start coming around and saying, okay, maybe this guy isn't so bad after all. And he's not in the world title picture anymore. New guys are getting an opportunity. And Roman Reigns is just wrestling in mixed tag matches with his girlfriend and proposing to her and shit like that. Once Roman Reigns gets to that level, fans will probably start lightening up on him. So if you put Cena and Roman in the ring together, the crowd reaction and the crowd involvement in that match should be extremely fun. That should be a lot of fun to watch. So I'm interested in that. I hope they do it. They might not. I might just be making this up, pulling it out of thin air, but a lot of you were tweeting me this idea during Raw. Hey, do you think it's kind of obvious that they're going to go with Cena and Roman at SummerSlam? And I'm like, well, I didn't really think about that, but given these rumors of Cena being a quote-unquote free agent, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I, for one, hope they do it. Now, as far as the rest of Raw goes, I'm going to kind of just bounce around here and talk about some of the main points. This was not a very enjoyable show. I found it boring at times. So I'll discuss some of the things that happened, and then we'll talk about Bray Wyatt and JoJo in the NBA Finals here in a minute. We had the main event, which was an advertised 2 out of 3 falls tag team title match between Sheamus and Cesaro and the Hardy Boys, and this thing sucked. The first fall came in like 3 minutes. I think Jeff Hardy took a brogue kick to the chest and got pinned, and then Matt Hardy, I think, hit the twist of fate on somebody and tied up the bout at 1 fall apiece, and then the whole thing ended in a countout. I mean, what the fuck is that shit? They're all brawling on the outside of the ring and they both get counted out, so the entire match is just a draw. It's a tie. So it was a completely pointless main event. We know we're going to get another match between these two now again. And I guess they might even set that up at the pay-per-view. And it just kind of sucked. And apparently there is a Hardy Boys interview on the WWE Network right now. I don't know if it's Bring It to the Table or whatever the hell it is. I'm yet to see that, but a few of you let me know about it. And we discussed it, like I said earlier on today, on Joe's show. But the Hardys kind of alluded to the fact that they do want to go singles at some point. And if WWE is still holding out hope that that broken character can be used with Matt Hardy, you know, he goes from an instant bottom-of-the-card guy to one of the most interesting things in the wrestling business just by transforming into that character. So hopefully this shit with Sheamus and Cesaro is just killing time until, you know, they figure out if they're ever going to do the broken characters or any deletion segments or whatever with that whole thing. And Jeff Hardy, of course, you know, I think he might have one run left in him. He even mentioned in that interview, somebody told me that he really wants to be in a Hell in the Cell match. And I never thought about that. Jeff Hardy's never been in one. That's kind of crazy. So I would have loved to see Jeff Hardy in a Hell in the Cell match 10 years ago, all the crazy shit he could have done back then. Jeff Hardy was always a huge star in WWE, a massive merchandise seller, and they loved him. So if they can give him one final run before he retires, maybe giving him another run with one of the titles, I think that would be pretty cool. Fans love Jeff. He can still go. He's 40 years old, but he can still swanton like he could when he was 20 years old. And maybe Hardy has got one last run left in him. And then if they can just figure out something to do with Matt and they can get their hands on that broken gimmick, then, oh man, it's going to be magic. But as far as the main event of Raw goes, I fucking hated it. We also had another segment involving Enzo and Cass. Now, this story is thickening every single week. They cut backstage to show Cass laid out again. Now, remember, we haven't seen either of these guys actually physically attack. We just see the aftermath of this. So we've had 2 weeks of Enzo getting laid out, now 2 weeks of Cass. And he's down there again, laying there. This time, they were a little bit more obvious with the Revival. As soon as the camera zoomed in on Cass, you could see the Revival walking in the background there. And of course, Dash Wilder apparently has been cleared to return to action, so the Revival can basically start working any time now. We saw them in the background there, adding to the speculation that it might be them attacking these two guys. Cass ends up getting up and he insists on still competing in their match with Gallows and Anderson. So he hobbles his injured ass out to the ring. They have their match with Gallows and Anderson. They lose. Gallows and Anderson continue the assault on Enzo after the match, and the Big Show comes out to make the save. And Cass doesn't like it. He's all suspicious. And there's another confrontation backstage with Enzo and Show, and Enzo asks him, hey, you know, just out of curiosity, was it you? And Big Show is like, of course not. It wasn't me that attacked you guys. So my idea is that it's Cass. It's gotta be Cass at this point. And the more they start teasing somebody else, the more I see the Revival walking around, the more I'm starting to think that it's not them. So what I think we're going to see next week, since we had Enzo laid out twice and Cass laid out twice, I'll bet you anything that next week on Raw, they're both going to be laid out. I bet the camera will cut backstage and you'll see Enzo and Cass both attacked, both laid out. When they come to, they will be so pissed off that they will challenge their attackers to meet them face to face in the ring at Great Balls of Fire. Whoever is responsible for this, stop being a coward. Come face us one-on-one at Great Balls of Fire. We will be in the ring waiting for you. All you got to do is show up. And so you fast forward to the pay-per-view. Enzo and Cass are out there. They call out the attackers, and the Revival's music hits, and they start making their way down to the ring. And about halfway down the aisle, that's when Cass turns. He nails Enzo from behind. The whole thing was a big setup by Cass. He attacked Enzo both times, and then he staged himself getting attacked twice to throw people off the trail. And then he attacked Enzo a third time and then staged an attack on himself and laid himself next to Enzo. And maybe he's even in cahoots with the Revival. Maybe he paid them off to be suspects in this whole thing and just to throw people off, and it was really him all along. And the Revival can just sit there in the aisleway and just watch Cass beat the hell out of Enzo, and they don't even have to do anything. So I kind of think that they might be going in that direction. I think if they are going to turn Cass heel, that's probably at this point the best way to do it. I think the fans are starting to suspect him as it is. So if it does turn out to be Cass, how surprising is it really going to be at this point? So if you just tease it and tease it and tease it as much as you can, maybe you can fool some fans next week by having them both laid out. And then if they call out their attackers and the Revival shows up, that might be the only way you can really surprise the fans. And then, while the Revival's music is still playing, that's when you have Cass just nail Enzo from behind. And when I say nail him, I mean fuck him up. I mean completely murder Enzo to where you have little kids crying in the audience. Like, beat him up that badly. He literally needs to eat him and shit him out in order to be launched, I think, as this big, bad, vicious, scary heel. So I'm hoping that's what they do with Cass, but I could be way off on that. It could just be the Revival, and Enzo and Cass could just be the Revival's first opponents since they're returning now, because they never really got off the ground when they were brought up to the main roster. Dash got injured so quickly. So, maybe it's just a simple program between the two teams, and this isn't leading to anything that interesting. But if you're ever going to turn Cass heel, this seems like the best opportunity. So that's kind of what I see them doing. Let's see, what else do I have written down? A couple of cruiserweight matches. Cedric Alexander beat Noam Dar in a ridiculous match. Noam comes out there. He's FaceTiming with Alicia Fox during his entrance. And the FaceTime is also being played on the big screen. And the whole thing was stupid. One of the dumbest things I've ever seen. I fucking hated it. And it was awful. The match went about 3 minutes and Alexander won. And that whole thing I just have absolutely zero interest in. Neville was supposed to take on Rich Swann, but when Rich is in there dancing during his entrance, Neville just attacks him, beats the hell out of him, cuts a great promo after the match, and starts talking about Tozawa, because Tozawa is trying to be recruited by the Titus brand. I still don't know what's going on there. Apollo Crews did face Kalisto on Raw, by the way, for like the 250th time, and ended up beating him. And Tozawa was involved. I think he was out on commentary, and then he takes a selfie with Apollo and Titus, and the whole thing was very weird. But apparently Titus is trying to get Tozawa a cruiserweight title match, and Neville attempted to send a message to Tozawa by beating the fuck out of Rich Swann, and I think he succeeded, because Neville is a pretty awesome badass, and I loved some of the things he said on the mic. It was really good. We had a really dumb women's segment. I didn't really like it. Alexa Bliss was out there cutting a promo. All the women come out there. Nia Jax, Mickie James, Sasha, Dana Brooke, and Emma made her return to Raw, so she showed back up. Great to see her. They all start brawling. It cuts right to commercial. We come back. We got a 6-woman tag. Nia, Alexa, and Emma taking on Mickie, Sasha, and Dana. And Alexa winds up walking off, allowing Sasha to lock Emma in the bank statement and tap her out. So I didn't really enjoy seeing Emma tap out on her return, but that's what the WWE always does with Emma, and it sucks. Our good friend Bayley was back. She had a sit-down interview with Corey Graves in a backstage segment on Raw, and basically, in a nutshell, they revealed nothing. She just said that she isn't changing, and she is who she is, and if people don't like it, or if they want to make fun of her, she didn't get to where she was by changing. She got to where she was by being true to herself, so whatever. And the whole thing ends with her asking Corey Graves if she can have a hug, and he kind of cringes and just reluctantly kind of gives her a little bit of a hug, and the whole thing was weird. So, I don't know if this is a continuation of the burial of Bayley. I made my comments known on the Bayley situation last week, if you want to check those out, but I was not happy about what the WWE has done with this person, how they've completely murdered this character that they've spent so much time and money and energy on. The only thing I can think of is that maybe they actually are changing her up, and the more Bayley says she's not going to change is actually going to lead to a change in the future, because the way Corey Graves gave her a hug, he had this look on his face like, this bitch is crazy. So maybe they're going to start doing something with Bayley where she's so positive and she's so over the top, and maybe she starts having like personality issues. Maybe she starts getting weirder and weirder, and then maybe she actually starts acting like a true 9-year-old. Maybe she thinks in her head that she's actually a 9-year-old kid. Maybe Bayley becomes broken Bayley. She's walking around out there like she's a toddler. She starts bringing a blankie and a teddy bear to the ring and starts getting really over the top with her, childish kind of gimmick. So if they did something like that and then everybody's worried about her, this chick is nuts, I think that would at least be a little bit more interesting and probably funny at times for them to do that rather than just keep Bayley who she is, have her go out there and lose every week and then want to hug everybody after they kick her ass. That makes no sense. So even though to me it appears like they're completely demolishing Bayley, I'm holding out hope that maybe this is just the start of something bigger for her. So we'll have to wait and see there, but I'm not holding my breath. Heath Slater and Rhino had a match with The Miz and a teddy bear. Miz, I think, thought the guy dressed up in the teddy bear was Dean Ambrose, and he attacks him, and it turns out it was not Dean Ambrose, just another random local guy. And then I think Ambrose was hiding under the ring or something in another bear costume and gets back in the ring. And Maurice is losing her mind. Turn around. And then Dean Ambrose takes off the bear mask, beats the shit out of The Miz. I don't even remember how the match ended. I was in and out of the room during this whole thing. So I don't know if Miz even won, or I don't know. He attacked his own partner, so I don't know what the fuck happened there. But the issue between The Miz and Dean Ambrose obviously is not over. And I hope they don't have a bear suit match at Great Balls of Fire. Remember the Weasel suit matches with Bobby Heenan years ago? He did that in the AWA and the WWE. And I'm hoping they don't do something like that. That would be really fucking ridiculous, but I'm half-ass nervous that they will. Kurt Angle and Miz were talking to each other backstage. I didn't really hear what he said there either. I don't have my notes written down about what that conversation was about. But I do know that Miz is in the doghouse with Maurice because he destroyed that grandfather clock, and then he knocked her off the ring apron accidentally during that whole segment with Dean Ambrose. So Miz ain't getting any pussy for a long time. Maurice is pissed at him. But, I guess we're just headed towards some sort of a gimmick match at Great Balls of Fire for the IC title between these two. Oh, and that's right. Earlier on in the show, Dean Ambrose took on Elias Sampson. Elias was out there singing his song. Dean Ambrose music hits and he interrupts. They have a pretty good match. Miz and Maurice get involved in that. And eventually, Elias gets the pin by nailing Dean Ambrose with his finisher after the distraction from Miz and Maurice. And that's what led to Dean Ambrose showing up later in the bear costume. So that whole thing is weird and silly, but I'm glad that it's allowed Elias Sampson to get a couple of victories. And, beating Dean Ambrose. Dean Ambrose is a relatively sizable star, and I like Elias Sampson. I love his look. Somebody sent me a tweet during Raw saying that they should do a Macho Man gimmick with Elias Sampson because he looks a lot like him. I agree. He looks a lot like late 90s WCW Macho Man, like 98, 99 when he started having the macho women with him. Who was it? It was like Molly Holly and Gorgeous George and maybe another one, I forget. But he does kind of resemble that version of Macho Man. But I still like his gimmick. I've been saying since he debuted that I'm intrigued by it, and I think there's potential there. And the more and more he does these little concerts, I think the more and more they're going to get over. And of course, finally, I will touch on the whole Bray Wyatt situation. Now, he was on Raw. He cut a promo on Raw and furthered his storyline with Seth Rollins, which, like I said last week, still confuses me. I thought they were going with Bray and Finn Balor, but apparently it's going to be a Bray and Seth Rollins program now. He was out there cutting his typical Bray Wyatt promo and took a tiny dig at the fans, I think, because of all the internet reports that were coming out on him earlier out in the day, saying something like dragging his name through the mud or whatever. I wasn't paying too much attention, but it did look like he subtly acknowledged that and then just went on to talk about Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins comes out and confronts him. And as he's cutting his promo on Bray, Bray's little music thing hits and the lights go out and he disappears. They come back on and he's now back on the Tron again, talking to Seth Rollins, and that whole thing was over. So we're going to get a big match between those two guys at Great Balls of Fire. But the bigger news is what is going on behind the scenes with Bray Wyatt. It was reported earlier on today that apparently his wife has filed for divorce, citing an affair. And apparently he's been having an affair and cheating on his wife with JoJo, the ring announcer. Holy shit, way to go, Bray. Fucking fist bump. There's nothing funny about adultery. There's nothing funny about cheating on your wife. It's a shame. It's terrible. It's horrifying. But it's a pretty interesting visual to think about Bray Wyatt and JoJo. My imagination has been running wild thinking about those two and what it looks like structurally when they have sex. On one hand, it's just like, oh, it sucks that Bray Wyatt's doing that to his wife. But on the other hand, it's JoJo. Fuck. That's probably some pretty tough temptation right there. And I always defend whenever any of these personal issues come out on these guys. And in my mind, I would never judge Bray Wyatt because you don't know this guy's situation. You don't know his family life. Apparently he's got a couple of kids, which is unfortunate, but you don't know. Maybe he's unhappy. They've been together for a long time. Maybe they have a marriage and they're starting to grow apart. Maybe they have the reasons for not wanting to be together. And, when you get guys on the road, I mean, this is nothing new. Every single wrestler, I'd probably say 70% of wrestlers over the years in the last 30 years have probably cheated on their wives on the road. My favorite wrestler of all time, Bret Hart, openly talks in his book about how he would have multiple girlfriends all over the world when he would travel, and he cheated on Julie a number of times, and he's completely honest about that. Seth Rollins was busted cheating as well, and I forget what Tom Phillips' situation was, if he was with somebody or not, but, this is extremely common. This is all very common, and it's just what happens now in the internet age and the information age. Everybody's personal business gets leaked out there. If this was 1985, you wouldn't have any clue about any of this going on, but with cell phones and video cameras and TMZs and shit like that, if you take nude selfies in the bathroom or if you fuck a wrestler and jizz on a title belt and you make a video of it, it's probably going to get out there. Where years ago, if you did this shit on a camcorder, nobody would probably ever see it. So for me, this latest scandal, I wouldn't even call it a scandal. I don't think WWE is really going to care in this situation. It's Bray Wyatt's personal life. I guess they don't really have much of a policy on talent dating each other because we've seen Renee Young and Dean Ambrose get married, and there's wrestling couples all over the place. When I was on with Joe today, he had mentioned something about a couple of years ago, WWE apparently did try to make a rule about talent not being allowed to date each other, but that's impossible. There's too many men and too many women. Back in the 90s, there wasn't much of a women's division. There was only a few women around. Sable, Marlena, Sunny, and Sunny, of course, hooked up with Shawn Michaels a bunch of times, and we've all heard those stories. But now there's so many more women involved. It's going to happen. People are going to get together. Hell, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, back in 2005, it happened to talent right before our very eyes. Lita cheated on Matt Hardy with Edge, and that led to a whole debacle. So this is stuff that always happens. John Cena's even been rumored to have these issues. Remember, he was divorced from his wife. There was rumors of him and Mickie James hooking up at times. So nobody is immune to this. Everybody has these temptations, and, I'm not going to judge anybody's marriage because I don't know the state of Bray Wyatt's marriage. If he loves this woman with all of his heart and he professes his love to her every single day and sends her flowers on the hour, every hour, and then he still cheats on her, yeah, he's a piece of shit. But if they're growing apart and their marriage is, or crumbling around them, spouses might stray, and that's just shit that happens in real life. It's unfortunate, but it is reality and it is part of life. So provided there's no sex tapes, which would be very interesting if one came out, I'd probably look at it with one eye open, I guess. But unless something really scandalous like that comes out, I don't really think this is a big deal. And WWE might have to have a talk with Bray Wyatt or JoJo and say, look, all right, we know what's going on. Just make sure this shit doesn't get out of hand. Don't do anything crazy. Please tell us you don't have any pictures or videos to worry about. And don't talk to the media about it. And just watch what you say. Don't make this situation any worse than it already is, and it'll probably just go away, and we can sweep it under the rug and move forward in a couple of months. So I don't think either of these two are going to be in trouble for this. And that's probably the extent of it. So, as far as that goes, I really don't have any issue with Bray Wyatt and JoJo getting together. It's not my business. It's not any of your business. And they're adults and they have the right to do whatever they want to do, even if that does mean hurting their spouse. It's not, like I said, it's not our business. So hopefully Bray Wyatt's divorce goes smoothly. Hopefully the kids will not be harmed by this. Hopefully they can continue to lead a good life. Hopefully Bray and his soon-to-be ex-wife can get along for the sake of the kids. And if Bray Wyatt is going to move on to a relationship with JoJo now, good for him. I'm pretty fucking envious. So, that's really my opinion on the Bray Wyatt situation. To me, it's not that huge of a deal. I don't think it's anything that's going to affect his spot on the roster. I don't think it's anything that's going to affect JoJo either. I mean, think about it. If people are coming out with dick pics and sex tapes in locker rooms and all that stuff and nothing's happening to them, I certainly wouldn't think that anything would happen to Bray Wyatt or JoJo. So I wish the two of them the best of luck weathering this shitstorm that they are currently in. But at the end of the day, I don't find it that big of a deal, but definitely an interesting story. And finally, I've been getting asked for weeks now to comment on the NBA Finals, and I'm just going to give a couple of minutes of opinions on this because I know a lot of you don't care about basketball at all, especially a lot of my overseas listeners, so feel free to just click off the video now. For those of you who care, the NBA Finals are over. The Golden State Warriors wrapped up their series with the Cleveland Cavaliers tonight. They won the series 4-1. They only had one loss in the playoffs, one, and that came in Game 4 of the Finals in Cleveland. They swept everybody else. And, you know, I gotta say, I don't really like the Warriors. I loved them when they started getting good. And when they won the title 2 years ago, I was thinking to myself, man, this is a very exciting team. I was happy for them. I've never seen a player like Steph Curry in my life. He is so damn unique and some of the things he can do. And they were just a really fun, exciting team. I thought it was exactly what the NBA needed. And they went to the NBA Finals and they handled Cleveland pretty easily in that. And I believe Kyrie Irving was injured that year for Cleveland. So it wasn't even really a fair matchup. But still, even with Kyrie, I thought the Warriors were a better team. And they won the NBA Finals. The very next year, the two teams meet in the finals again. And the Warriors are killing Cleveland. They're up 3-1. And then all of a sudden, LeBron James remembers who he is and remembers that he has championship experience and comes through in the most clutch ways possible. They came back from a 3-1 deficit and won the NBA title, winning Game 7 on Golden State's home floor, an arena that they only lost like one regular season game the whole year. To win in that environment in Game 7 and to shut down the Warriors, I thought was unbelievable. LeBron's performance was awesome. Kyrie Irving's performance was awesome. Even that three-pointer at the end was fucking magical. And LeBron's big block on Iguodala, you know, with just a couple of minutes left. So many things contributed to the Warriors choking like that, and it was one of my favorite Game 7s in all of sports. And I could not believe that the Warriors, who I felt were the better team, blew that 3-1 lead. And when it was over, I was like, wow, congratulations, Cleveland. I've always had LeBron's back. I've always liked LeBron James. I always found all the hate for him to be ridiculous. You know, the guy's a good guy. It's much like John Cena. I've said this for years. You know, he keeps his nose clean. He's never in any trouble. He works his ass off. He's not lazy. His number one goal is to win and to win championships, and he's been to 7 NBA Finals in a row. That's insane. I don't care what his win-loss record is. It's amazing to go to 7 in a row, and there's a really good chance it'll be 8 in a row next year. So when they beat the Warriors last year, I was thinking to myself, wow, we're going to get the same two teams again next year. The Warriors are probably going to be pissed. They're probably going to dominate just like they did this year, and they're going to go all the way to the NBA Finals and face Cleveland again in a rubber match. Warriors 1-1, Cleveland 1-1, and now is the tiebreaker. But where I lost respect for the Warriors is when they signed Kevin Durant in the offseason. And I'm like, well, fuck, now it's not even fair. That Golden State Warriors team could beat the Eastern Conference's all-star team in a game if they played against each other. I swear to God they could. That's how overly stacked that team is. And I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, why do you have to go and do that and ruin it? Because now it feels like it's an inevitability that the Warriors are going to win the title. And what made me mad about the Kevin Durant signing is I think the Warriors would have still gone into the NBA Finals this year and still been the favorites to beat Cleveland without Kevin Durant. I don't think that they needed Kevin Durant. They were that good. They were ridiculous. Crazy win-loss record. They would have done the exact same thing this year. They would have blown through everybody, made it to the finals, and had that true rubber match with Cleveland when both teams were at full strength. But then they go off and sign this ultra superstar, somebody that arguably is just as good, if not better, than LeBron James. Well, now that puts them over the edge. You know, to me, they were putting pressure on themselves because I'm thinking to myself, now that you've signed Durant, you have one option. Your one option is that you must win the NBA title. If you do not, you are going to be considered a failure. I don't care if you go undefeated in the regular season and undefeated in the playoffs. If you lose the NBA title again, you are going to be complete and total failures because how do you not win with that team? And it makes me mad when I think about years ago when Chris Paul was going to come to the Lakers and the NBA blocked it. I think they were in charge of or in control of the Hornets at that time where Chris Paul was playing, and some trade got blocked or whatever. And basically the reasoning behind it is that they didn't want to create any super teams or have an imbalance of talent or whatever. And I'm like, why was Chris Paul not allowed to go to the Lakers, but Kevin Durant is allowed to go to the Warriors and a team that's already the favorites to win the NBA title without him? What made me the most mad about it is how can you defend and be perfectly okay with what Kevin Durant did, but hate LeBron James for essentially doing the same thing. When he left Cleveland and went to Miami, fans were burning his fucking jersey. You know, what did the guy do? He fulfilled his contract. It's not like he jumped ship in the middle of the night. It's not like he was like Rick Rude, who appeared on Raw and Nitro on the same night. He just fulfilled his contract. He wasn't able to lead that team. They weren't putting enough pieces around him, much like Kevin Durant. He could not lead the Oklahoma City Thunder to a championship, so he left. And he had Russell Westbrook. LeBron James did not have Russell Westbrook. He kind of has that now with Kyrie, but in his first run in Cleveland, he didn't have that. He didn't have the pieces around him necessary to win a title, especially when the West is so strong. So he left and played with his friends, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, formulated this super team down in Miami, a team that wasn't even established yet. Think about that. The Warriors were going to be NBA favorites without Kevin Durant, and Kevin Durant joined that team. LeBron James was joining a Miami team that wasn't established at all. They hadn't been to 2 finals in a row. They hadn't already won a title. They were going to try to make a team themselves and make a contending team out of a team that really was at the bottom rung of the playoffs for the past few years. Miami wasn't even that strong. But you put LeBron and Bosh with D-Wade, all of a sudden they're favorites. So those guys weren't even going to an already established team. Kevin Durant was. He was going to a team that probably could have won the title without him, and he's just riding their coattails to get his ring. Now, if I'm going to sit here and defend LeBron James, I'm also going to defend Kevin Durant. I'm not saying that what Durant did was wrong. I'm just saying I don't like it. And I think there's a double standard with a lot of the fans that hate LeBron James but think it's perfectly fine for Kevin Durant to do what he did. I defend both guys. I don't like what Durant did. I don't like that he just joined up with the strongest team in the league simply to get himself a ring instead of leading a team to a championship. And don't get me wrong, he won the MVP. He scored over 30 points in like every game. I mean, Kevin Durant is a beast. He's one of my favorite players to watch. I'm not taking a thing away from his ability. It's just if anybody out there criticized LeBron for taking quote unquote the easy way out to get a ring, you cannot be okay with what Kevin Durant did. That makes no sense, and that's a double standard. So I think the Warriors are an amazing team, but I think they're overpowered, and it wasn't a fair fight. I would have loved to see the 2 teams that faced each other last year face each other this year. The exact 2 same teams. Get Kevin Durant out of the mix and let these 2 teams battle toe-to-toe, probably going to 7 games, and let the better team win. But when you add Durant, it spoiled it. I barely paid any attention to the NBA season because I knew Cleveland was going to make it in the East, and you knew for damn sure that the Warriors were going to make it in the West, and you knew we were going to get a rematch, and you knew Golden State was going to win. There was no way they were not going to win the title this year. It was way too predictable, and it took away the magic, I think, of the NBA playoffs. Golden State swept everybody. They almost made history by winning every single game, including the finals. LeBron and Cleveland just got that one victory in Game 4. Other than that, the Warriors were unstoppable. And that's all fine and good if that's your team. If you live in Northern California, you're probably on cloud 9 right now. But for the rest of us, it felt a little bit cheap, and I didn't like it. I would have much preferred to see Golden State of last year face LeBron and Cleveland of this year. If that match happened and Golden State swept LeBron and swept the Cavs and went on to the title, I'd be jumping for joy for them. I'd be like, wow, you guys proved everybody wrong. You had that epic collapse last year and you came back and redeemed yourself. Way to go. Great basketball. It was a privilege to watch you guys go out there and do that. But instead, they signed Kevin Durant, making the whole damn thing unfair, and I just don't like it. So there's a lot of people that probably disagree with me on this opinion, and that's fine. It's just, to me, it cheapened the whole thing. And, Kevin Durant is hugging everybody and hugging his mom, and he's in tears, and he's so happy to win his ring, his championship ring. Finally, yes, I'm happy for you. You got a title, but you kind of did it in a way that, I don't want to say I don't respect Kevin Durant, because I do. His talent and his skill is unbelievable. So I don't want to say I don't respect Kevin Durant. That's not really accurate. I just, I guess I don't respect the way he won his ring. To me, he didn't win it the way LeBron won it. LeBron led his team. He went back to Cleveland after everybody shit on him when he left, won a couple of rings in Miami, learned how to win a championship, learned how to perform and lead a team to a title, went back home and took a team that didn't even make the playoffs the previous year and took them to the NBA Finals. I respect that a lot more than what Kevin Durant did. So at the end of the day, congratulations to the Golden State Warriors. I'm not saying you're a bad team at all. You're probably one of the better teams that the league has ever seen. I just think that you're a little bit overpowered, and I think it's a little bit unfair. And now next year, they're going to be even more of a favorite. I mean, how are these guys going to lose? Provided they stay healthy, and you've got Draymond Green, you got Steph Curry, you've got Klay Thompson, you've got Kevin Durant, you've got a brilliant coaching staff. How does that team not win again? So I think we're going to get these two teams again, 4 years in a row. I don't even think we've gotten the NBA Finals 3 years in a row between three teams. Maybe way back in the day when the Celtics were winning like 35 titles in a row. But I can't remember in recent history where two teams faced each other 3 years in a row in the finals. And now, provided LeBron's healthy and Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving all come back to the Cavs and everybody's healthy, I think we're going to see the same two teams match up again next year. And unless Golden State suffers an injury that evens the playing field, they're probably going to win it again. And to me, I just wish the fight was a little bit more fair. Anyway, that's pretty much my opinions on the NBA Finals. So everybody that's been asking me to comment about that, I hope you enjoyed it. I don't talk about sports very often. Usually when the championships come around, Super Bowl, NBA Finals, I always mention something. And there you go. I know a lot of you wanted me to talk about sports more often, but I just really don't have time. This is a wrestling channel, and if I started working in sports into the mix, that would be really tough to keep up with. So the best I'm going to be able to do is just touch on some other sports from time to time. So anyway, I'm going to get out of here. You guys have a great rest of your week. I will catch you maybe on Friday-ish, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, somewhere in there. All I know is it'll be before Sunday, and I'll talk a little bit about this week's SmackDown, and I'll predict the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. So I'll talk to you guys in just a few days. Take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you real soon. Until next time, peace.